Hello and welcome to the National Security Conversations. Today we will discuss Pakistan's domestic politics and its implications for India, the China-Pakistan economic corridor and Prime Minister Imran Khan's India policy. To do so, I have with me in the studio Dr. Farzana Shaikh. Dr. Farzana Shaikh is a well-regarded Pakistani British scholar and is an associate fellow at the Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. She's the author of the much acclaimed book, Making Sense of Pakistan. The 2018 edition of this much acclaimed book is now in the markets with a new introduction. So make sure to grab a copy of this very interesting book if you want to understand Pakistan. Farzana is also currently doing a project on the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor at the Chatham House. So welcome to the National Security Conversations, Dr. Shaikh.
Thank you, Happy Mom.
Let's begin this conversation with the controversial case of Aasia Bibi, the Pakistani Christian woman who was on the death row for 8 years for charged on a blasphemy case. The Pakistani Supreme Court recently acquitted her of all charges, but it has not gone down well with the right-wingers in Pakistan. What do you make of it?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be said is that this was a landmark judgment, without a doubt. And it has been widely welcomed across the political spectrum, except, as you say, for sections within the hard right, particularly the religious right, who have mounted demonstrations across the country in protest, claiming that this judgment went against or was intended to weaken Pakistan's blasphemy laws. The new government, led by Prime Minister Imran Khan, of course, took a very strong stance against these religious parties when they mounted protests. Imran Khan came out. Initially, exactly. And this was before he left the country in the midst of a crisis to go to China. But anyway, he warned that the might of the state would be brought to bear on these groups, particularly because they were, in the course of their protests, calling for the justices of the Supreme Court to be made the object of targeted killings, because they were also said to be encouraging mutiny against the armed forces, and of course to say nothing of speeches that were obviously intended to incite hatred. So Imran Khan made this very strong statement, which was intended to send a clear message, and again that was widely welcomed.
Why did he eventually back down? Because the judiciary had very strong words to say about it. In fact, the judge went on to say that the judiciary is not just for Muslims, it's for all Pakistanis. The army was behind the judgment. In fact, they stood behind the judgment. The political parties were, at least Imran Khan stood behind it. So why this capitulation eventually? What led to that?
Well, there is a long history of capitulation on the part of the Pakistani state when confronted by sort of the kind of muscular politics adopted by parties of the religious right, who have really enormous political clout, who can pull out the crowds. And successive governments have caved in because, of course, they fear mayhem. And Imran Khan's government was no exception. But there is another factor here that I think we need to bear in mind, and that is that although Imran Khan, as I said, did make a statement, saying that his government was going to take a very strong stance against these groups, he, of course, campaigned on a partially Islamist agenda.
That's correct.
And, he was seen by many to have been working in tandem, at least at the level, at the discursive level, at the level of discourse, at the level of electioneering, working in tandem with some of these parties on the hard right, not least, of course, the TLP, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, which is, of course, now spearheading this movement. And do remember that last year, when the TLP managed to force the resignation of the law minister, then the law minister of, serving under Sharif's PMLN-led government, Imran Khan was among those siding with the TLP at that time and supporting them in their position to suggest that indeed the law minister, by seeking to amend those electoral laws, which the TLP accused him of doing with a view to weakening blasphemy laws in Pakistan, he sided with the TLP. So there are many who believe that Imran Khan has, on many occasions, piggybacked on the TLP in tapping a certain kind of religious vote bank.
Here is my confusion. On the one hand, in the recent elections, in the last elections, when you had the national elections, the outfits that were sponsored by, say, terror groups in Pakistan hardly gained any votes. In fact, consistently you've seen that right-wing parties don't gain many votes in the Pakistani elections. And on the other hand, the governments tend to supplicate before the right-wing elements. Isn't that a contradiction, and why does that happen?
Well, it's only an apparent contradiction to my mind. Look, these elections led to, as we know, the participation of many radical hardline Islamist groups. Together, they garnered something like 2.2 million votes. The national average was about 10%. They gained a percentage of just under 10%, which is, par for the course. But what is interesting is that these groups came in, many of them participating in the election on the back of a policy that is known as mainstreaming. A policy that had the backing of the security establishment, first introduced in 2016, which was predicated on the assumption that if you allow radical groups to be mainstreamed, as it were, enter the electoral fray, they would be forced to moderate their discourse. Indeed, what we see is far from this moderating, encouraging these groups to moderate their discourse, or they actually radicalized mainstream discourse, so that parties like the PTI, the PMLN, and to a lesser extent the PPP, were all then campaigning on grounds which would normally have been regarded as, in breach of the usual agendas espoused by mainstream parties. They, all, for example, took a united stand with the TLP on the blasphemy laws. There was, uniformity across the board. There was, talk of an Islamic welfare state. And do remember that, amongst the parties that first called for an Islamic welfare state was, of course, the LET, the Lashkar-e-Tayyiba.
This is very interesting, Dr. Shaikh. Normally, in conflict situations, one finds that if you manage to get some of these groups into the mainstream political discourse and sort of get them to fight elections and contest elections, they end up becoming part of the mainstream narrative. And that has happened in Kashmir, that has happened in the northeast of India, that has happened in the Indian Punjab. And this is a tried and tested method all over the world. Why has it not become successful in Pakistan?
Well, I think there are good historical reasons for that. One reason, which I address squarely in my book, is that at the heart of this turmoil that we see, this turmoil that plagues the state to this day, we have a chronic uncertainty, a fundamentally chronic uncertainty about the state's precise relation to Islam. This has led, to my view, this has led to many governments being unwilling to, as it were, take a strong stance against parties of the religious right, for fear that they might be seen to be less Muslim, that they might be seen in some way as not up to fulfilling the extravagant claims of Pakistan, being a state serving the cause of Islam. And this is because, as I said, right from the inception of the state, there was a lack of clarity. We've had 3 constitutions, and each of those constitutions has been unable to resolve this key question of whether or not Pakistan is to be simply a Muslim state, an inclusive Muslim state.
What does the common Pakistani think about it? Does he or she think that this is a good law and this should continue? What is, or larger, put it differently, what does the common Pakistani think about what kind of a state Pakistan is or should be?
Well, look, I mean, to get back to your first question about what do most Pakistanis think about the blasphemy laws, there was a survey done, I think it was 2011 or 2012, a Pew survey, in which more than 65% of Pakistanis, were opposed to any change in the existing blasphemy laws, right? Now, whether or not they took this position because there is such a climate of intimidation and fear around this question, or whether it is because of other reasons that may have to do with, a genuine belief that, yes, one must pay with one's life for committing blasphemy. One never really knows.
In any case, the prevailing discourse in a country will obviously influence the people and how they vote in sort of support or against a particular law.
Precisely. But I think it's what it does is raise some serious questions, which again, I have talked about in recent discussions here in Delhi. About the status and the credibility of Pakistan's so-called moderate voter. Until now, there was a feeling that, there was a moderate voter out there that would keep at bay parties of the hard religious right, and would always ensure that mainstream parties promoting mainstream agendas, not dedicated necessarily to Islamic causes, would be the ones that would always win out. But what we found is that with parties like the PTI having appropriated the agenda, as it were, of the TLP, appropriated the Islamist agenda, and yet being able to garner the kind of support that it has enjoyed, it does say something about what is happening to this so-called moderate constituency on which Pakistan has built its image of being a moderate Muslim state.
This is interesting because many moderate Pakistanis, well-meaning, well-educated Pakistanis that I have talked to in the past, have said they look at Mr. Imran Khan as the messiah of Pakistan. The Naya Pakistan or the new Pakistan that he has promised to the Pakistanis has gone down very well. with the general public. But you mentioned in one of your early answers that you look at Imran Khan as having had connections with the right-wing parties in the past, and do you think this is going to sort of color his policies towards the region, towards India, towards Pakistan, or will that have no impact at all in his foreign policy, say, towards India?
Well, look, it's very difficult to tell. At the moment, we can only go by what he does. So he's been in power now for scarcely 3 months, right? So he comes in and his first statement, his first national address is one where he promises, an Islamic welfare state, but in the same breath also promises to deliver Jinnah's Pakistan. Now, for many people, of course, the two are in contradiction one with the other. One of his first actions was to name a very eminent economist currently based in the United States, Atif Mia, who is an Ahmadi by faith, and Ahmadis, as you know, are not only seen to be non-Muslims by the Constitution of Pakistan, but are held by many in Pakistan to hold beliefs that border on blasphemy. Within about 3 days, he had been forced to backtrack and forced Dr. Mia to step down from the Economic Advisory Council. It is said not just under pressure from the TLP, but also under pressure from sections within his own party. And the same sort of capitulation, again, we have seen with regard to the TLP and the appeasement on the Aasia Bibi.
Contradictions within Imran Khan's policy, both domestically, clearly in the domestic sphere. A lot of people in India argue that the Imran Khan is a puppet of the Pakistan army, but some people say that he's too temperamental to be the puppet of anybody. Which side of this debate do you sort of find yourself in?
Well, look, he is known to be volatile, but I'd just like to go back to the question that you asked earlier on about Imran Khan being projected as the new Messiah. Now, Imran Khan, as we know, has long campaigned against dynastic politics, but if he is planning to replace dynastic politics with the cult of personality, that does not bode well for Pakistan. What Pakistan needs is not just strong leadership.
What's wrong with strong personalities as
leaders?
With
the cult of personality, I said, with the cult of personality. And what's wrong with strong personalities is that, what, to my mind, Pakistan needs is not just strong leadership resting on strong personalities. We do need that. But Pakistan needs, above all, strong, robust institutions.
Well said.
Institutions. And that we do not have. The strongest institutions whose influence has been, how shall I put it, rather less than positive for Pakistan has been the military. Parliament and the judiciary, remain, particularly Parliament, institutions constantly under pressure.
But do you want to sort of go back to the other question that I asked about, there's this argument about being the puppet of the Pakistan army, and then that he's too temperamental. He changes his policies from time to time. So from an Indian point of view, how should we look at it? For the Indian public, should we be worried about the fact that he's a Pakistani army puppet? Or should we say, well, what's wrong with that? Because at the end of the day, what we need in Pakistan, from an Indian point of view, is a certain amount of consensus between the elites, the political elite, and the Pakistani military elite. So how do you sort of respond to that?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is that Imran Khan is not just a puppet of the military. Imran Khan commands huge support across vast swathes of Pakistan, particularly urban Pakistan, Punjab, which is our largest and most populous province, of course, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in urban centres in Sindh. His reach in Balochistan is rather fragile and tenuous at the moment, but nevertheless, he can claim, I think, with some justice, to being a national party in Pakistan. Having said that, I think there are many who believe that had it not been for the military's active support in arranging what many describe as the grounds for pre-poll rigging. What we had here in these elections, which made these elections so controversial, was precisely pre-poll rigging, by which, I mean, the judiciary being brought in to rule in a manner that would to issue verdicts and rulings that would clearly make it impossible for Sharif and his party to make any real headway in these elections. There was a clampdown on the press, sections of the press that wanted to give some publicity to opposite, to Sharif's faction of the PMLN, had their advertising mysteriously withdrawn.
I understand, but my question from an Indian point of view is, does that create a problem for India? From an Indian point of view, it's a good thing.
Imran Khan, when he came in, everybody said, well, the military and Imran Khan are on the same page. And so, you negotiate with Imran Khan, and, you obviously have, something positive likely to emerge from this. My own view of this is that we will just have to wait and see how it pans out. At the moment, I don't think that India-Pakistan relations is exactly on the top of the agenda as far as Imran Khan's government is concerned. He has taken over at a time when Pakistan is in deep economic straits. I think addressing the economy, I think making overtures towards those who are regarded as Pakistan's friends, China and Saudi Arabia, are absolutely paramount. This is what is going to command the attention of the new government, for better or for worse. And if there is going to be any strain between Imran Khan and the military, it's unlikely actually to be over India. And there I would go along with you that, perhaps they are working more closely in cooperation with one another. It's very likely to be over China.
How deeply is the Pakistani state involved in Kashmir today? And I'm not just talking about from a say financial or militancy point of view. I'm talking it from an emotional point of view. Do the political parties in Pakistan, do the people of Pakistan, do they feel passionately about what is happening in Kashmir, and hence the establishment in Pakistan has to do certain things vis-a-vis Kashmir or in Kashmir? How do you sort of look at it?
Well, there are two ways in which I can answer this. One is that, yes, broadly, there is a resonance. There is a resonance, and the whole issue of Kashmir is unquestionably emotive. However, I would also say that its salience is unevenly spread across the country. And that, for example, the kind of passion with which the issue is addressed in the Punjab is not something you are likely to witness in Sindh, and even less possibly in Balochistan. There are Baloch nationalists today who believe that, their cause, for example, has received absolutely no attention and has been put firmly on the back burner, and they have lost out, over this larger cause of Kashmir. So what I'm trying to say is that there is an uneven spread with regard to this question of Kashmir. But it will always remain an important and potentially volatile issue, not just for political parties seeking to capitalize on an issue that I've said is emotive, but also for the military, because by keeping this conflict alive with India over Kashmir in many ways, the Pakistani military, of course, has secured its political fortunes. So, you know, I think that there is this broad context.
Dr. Shaikh, one of the most viable solutions that have been suggested to resolve the Kashmir problem or dispute, or whatever you call it, has been the 4-point formula proposed by General Pervez Musharraf. But the dispensations that came in after Musharraf in Pakistan have been quite negative about the so-called Musharraf formula. Although it still retains some sort of saliency in Kashmir, and even within Delhi there is a feeling that this is probably as far as we can go. But it hasn't found that much traction within Pakistan. Why so?
Well, at the time when it was first mooted, it did have some traction, particularly amongst constituencies that supported Musharraf. But, you know, ultimately, despite the very great merits of this scheme, Musharraf was a man without a mandate. And for those of us seeking to consolidate the process of democracy or democratization in Pakistan, you can't have it both ways. You can't, you know, be on the one hand be campaigning for the army to take a back seat and return to the barracks and leave foreign policy to Pakistan's elected rulers, and then at the same time also go out and support an unelected military general, however good his plans may be to normalize and settle relations with India. It's a difficult one, this. Ideally, what we would have wanted is for Pakistan's elected leaders to provide some kind of solution along these lines or other lines to normalize relations. But every time an elected government has attempted to do so, as we've just seen with Sharif, they are slapped down. It is slapped down. Because this is one area, which is to say the area of India-Pakistan relations, that the military guards jealously as its own.
Dr. Shaikh, let's talk about China. You have been working on CPEC for a very long time, and from what I read and see in Pakistan, there's a groundswell of support for CPEC within the military, within the political classes, and within the general public in Pakistan. Where is CPEC leading Pakistan? Is CPEC good for Pakistan? What's your objective assessment of that?
Well, again, I think the first thing that needs to be said here, and this is to Imran Khan's credit, that he is possibly the only leader who has raised some very serious questions about CPEC and, you know, what CPEC might bring for Pakistan. Until now, it was pretty much taboo. You did not talk about CPEC or raise any criticism about CPEC for fear that because it was seen to be embraced by so many Pakistanis, to raise quite serious concerns was to be almost tantamount to be acting against the national interest.
Right.
Okay? Now, Imran Khan, as I said, to his credit, has put this back on the table and has, you know,
so debates and discussions are
debates and discussions are open. Today you can talk about CPEC, about the fact that possibly some of the debt burden on Pakistan is unsustainable, that some of this debt burden perhaps arises out of Pakistan's ever closer engagement in the CPEC project, that perhaps, Pakistan was really in no position to take on the kind of huge infrastructure projects that CPEC came with, that Pakistan perhaps should have negotiated a harder bargain, that perhaps Pakistan should have called for more social welfare programs to be tied to CPEC instead of just huge roads and power projects. And Imran Khan, as I said, must take the credit for putting these questions back on the table.
You also alluded earlier that there could be a potential fallout between the army and Imran Khan on the question of China. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yes. The military, of course, has been, a wholly paid up subscriber, as it were, to CPEC, not just because of the increasingly close strategic relations between China and Pakistan, but of course the military as an institution could potentially stand to gain economically, because of course the military is very technically equipped to deal with big infrastructure projects. There has always been, a very strong sentiment within the military to back this project. And as I said, if there is going to be a strain between Imran Khan and the military, it could be over CPEC. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. And the reason for that is because, of course, as long as CPEC continues to impose what many in Pakistan regard, rightly or wrongly, there's some question marks over this, impose this crippling debt burden on Pakistan, Imran Khan cannot deliver on his Islamic welfare state.
But let's look at it this way, from the Pakistani establishment's point of view. With the breakup of the relationship with the United States, Pakistan is virtually friendless in some ways in the international system. So China is key to the re-emergence of Pakistan as a pivotal power in the Southern Asian region. So, and because Pakistani establishment has used China to its advantage, now you have the Russians cozying up, you have the Saudis giving $6 billion to Pakistan, and you have a big power in the neighborhood, which Pakistani establishment thinks is threatening of its interests. So, from a Pakistani establishment's point of view, CPEC and China are probably crucial to its re-emergence as a pivotal power in the region. Don't you agree?
It is. Pakistan, of course, as we know, has a very close relation with China. It regards China as a friend who will see Pakistan through hard times. But I think it's also important to bear in mind, and I fear that Imran Khan's PTI might not have got this end of the stick. CPEC is not a money bag. I mean, it's not a money tree that you shake and it's going to drop pennies for Pakistan either to clear its debts or delay, as in the past, economic reform. CPEC is only one part of a $1 trillion 60-country mega project, the Belt and Road Project. It's only one part of that, and it is intended primarily to give meaning and to realize what President Xi described as China's dream. Pakistan must, or is seen by China as a country that must play its part in this, because the way China looks at it, Pakistan has something to gain because it will have access to the markets of some 50 or 60 countries via this Belt and Road Project. But CPEC was never intended to help Pakistan address its problems of governance, which is what today, as in the past, this government is faced with.
Dr. Shaikh, wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.